Sorry if I'm a little sweaty today, YouTube. You already know what I'm doing. So today's video, my glasses are all smudged up. Yeah, this is not gonna work today. Glasses were smudged. I'm not wearing them. So today's video is actually going to be about growth rate in bearded dragons. Now, you're going to get a lot of different opinions on growth rate, and the only opinion that matters is yours. So what are you comfortable in terms of a pet or a breeder when it comes to growth rate? Now, for me, growth rate is very important. I don't want a dragon that grew up too fast, and I don't want a dragon that grew up too slow. There's averages for a reason. There's wild bearded dragons. You can kind of get the averages off the wild bearded dragons and what their maximum weight and size are, versus like the average and all of that. I've talked about this before, but for some reason, I keep seeing it more and more where people are bragging about, oh, my dragon is 6 months old and 200 grams. That is not something you need to brag about. That's something you really need to take a good hard look in the mirror about and figure out why you want your dragon that big, that quick. Now, I've talked about this before, like I've said, and typically for me anyways, a 200 gram bearded dragon is usually about 12 to 18 months old. Not less. That's it. Now, if your bearded dragon is 2 years old and 200 grams, then that's a little bit of a red flag. Obviously, it really depends on the growth rate that the entire life of the bearded dragon had, versus what the end result is. So if a dragon is a slow grower its entire life, or it's a shorter dragon, or dwarf, you could call it. It's not really a dwarf bearded dragon because there's already pygmy dragons or the Rankins dragons. So I don't breed any of those, but people already have those, so you can't really say they're pygmy dragons or dwarf dragons. You can say they're just stunted. That's very common. I'm not saying that everybody has stunted dragons, but there is about a 10% of the dragons out there are probably stunted because of bad breeding, because of their self. Some dragons aren't just not going to be big. Some they failure to thrive is what I call it. And then some people just don't take care of their dragons that well, and they become stunted because of that. So, not saying that you're going to have a stunted dragon, but I'm saying there's a chance. There's a possibility based off the individual bearded dragon. However, growth rate's important in the clutch as a whole, so if you get it from a breeder, those are questions you want to ask. How big are the rest of the clutch mates? How big are the parents? Is this the smallest, the biggest, in between? What is this bearded dragon that I'm buying? Where does it fall into the entire spectrum of that clutch in terms of growth rate and their weight? So, I have a couple clips that I recorded separate from this video. I knew I was going to make this video, so I went ahead and recorded them. So I'm going to show the first clip now. Here we have an example. We have this female. No idea how much she weighs, but she's massive. I would say she's probably 60 grams, if not more. And then we have this female. That's probably like 20 grams, maybe 30 grams. She's about half the size. And they're sisters. Same clutch and everything. And this is why growth rate's important, because looking at them together, you can tell this one is way smaller. However, this one just grew way too fast. So has nothing to do with, oh, compare it to the other clutch mates. That's not going to work, because in that same clutch you could have a dragon that looks like this and a dragon that looks like this, and that's a huge difference. I'm pretty sure she's pushing 60 grams, but they're getting a little baff right now, so I figured I'd record them. But you can see how the size difference alone, and they're sisters. I mean, that's kind of crazy. But she just grew a lot faster, and there's nothing we can do about it. And in this clip, you saw that there's two different bearded dragons from the same clutch, and obviously there's a good size difference there, but not drastic to where I would call the smaller dragon a failure to thrive or a runt. These are dragons that are just part of the entire group, and one of them just took off. That's usually how it happens. I have clutches where none of them take off and none of them are runts, and they all are the same size the entire time, probably their entire lives. But every once in a while you get one dragon, and usually, I'm not going to say this is bloodline, but that particular dragon came from a dragon that I have bred before, and he, for some reason, always has 2 or 3 dragons that just take off in the entire clutch. And I'm not saying it has to do with genetics. It could just be those individual dragons have a very good food drive, and the other ones don't have as good of a food drive as that one. But it could also be that just the bloodline, you know? So some dragons, I have had dragons that have been 23 inches, 23 and a half inches, and I have had dragons, I currently have dragons that are about 18 inches, 19 inches. So that's a big difference in size there as well. And that usually, that big of a gap, about 4 or 5 inches, usually is about 100 or 150 grams of weight for that bearded dragon. So if you have a 23-inch bearded dragon that's about 500 grams, that's probably not something terrible. I mean, that's a big bearded dragon. That's a big old bearded dragon, 23 inches and 500 grams. That's about how big my bearded dragon was. That was about 23 inches. And then the ones that are about 18, 19 inches, those are sitting around 300, 350. And that's usually where I wanted to keep them, especially my males. I don't like my males getting too massive, especially if my female, because my males breed a lot longer than females do. So if I have a male that's 500 grams, I'm not saying it's going to be harder for him, but I have seen males that get too overweight or too big become sluggish and not breed as well. So that's essentially why I don't want my males to get that big. I want them to be lean. They still eat. I'm not saying they don't eat. They still eat just as good as the females. But I keep them on the smaller diet. That way they're not getting 500 grams. They're not producing eggs. They're not doing all of the work. So essentially the more you feed them, the fatter they get. I don't want that to happen. I want them to be lean. I want them to be good breeding machines because obviously that's what I have them for. Obviously, now I say I want them to be breeding machines, but every animal in here is a pet. I hang out with every animal. I try to play with every single animal. Now, obviously, I have like 100 of them, but everyone gets its attention the way it's supposed to get. Some of them are mean. Some of them are nice. The mean ones get a little bit more attention because I'm trying to get them less mean. The nice ones gets attention just because they're nice, and I want to hang out with the nice dragons, right? But essentially what happens is the growth rate is different across the board, even as adults. So with babies, it could be bloodline, it could be failure to thrive, it could just be the individual itself, it's going to be a big dragon overall. So those are all questions you need to ask your breeders. Now I will show you a second clip and another example of a dragon that took off compared to the other ones, but in this one I want to show you how a breeder would determine if they have, well, how I determine anyways, not a breeder, how I determine if a dragon is just oversized or if a dragon is undersized. So I'll show you that clip now. So the reason this is important is because you never know if you actually have a runt or not by looking at the rest of the dragons. So these are all related. This one here is obviously very, very small. And this one here can probably eat that dragon. I mean, yeah, probably so. But the problem is, how do you determine you have a runt? If you look at this dragon and you look at this dragon, you immediately say, well, yeah, this one's the runt. These are related. This guy took off in weight and size. This one did not take off. These are the sisters to this one. Not much different in size there. Still way smaller than that guy. And that's why it's important to take the averages. The other way you could do it is take the medium weight. The median weight will actually give you the weight that's in the middle versus the average weight will take this guy's weight into consideration. So as you saw in that clip, there was 4 dragons. One of them was massive and the other 3 were normal size. I guess you could say normal size. You don't know what normal size is just by looking at them because you don't know how old they are. But one of them is massive, one of them is smaller, and 2 of them are in the middle. Essentially, I showed that clip to figure out, well, if I were going off the biggest one, the smaller one would be underweight. But if I was going off the 2 middle sizes, the averages, then, or not the averages, the medians, then essentially the smaller one wouldn't be underweight. It would be smaller, but it wouldn't be considered a failure to thrive or a runt, in my eyes anyways. So essentially what you want to figure out is, if you're buying a bearded dragon, where does it fall within the entire clutch? Not where does it fall within all of the bearded dragons ever made in the world. That clutch. That clutch is the only thing that matters for you in terms of the size of that bearded dragon. Because if you want a dragon that's going to have a high food drive, is going to get probably bigger, then go for the dragon that's the biggest in the clutch. If you want a dragon that's going to be mellow, because honestly, the ones that have a high food drive are usually the ones that are aggressive or try to bite your fingers. Not gonna lie, because usually anything that moves is going to be food, and that's usually how it is for those types of dragons. Now, the ones that are more mellow are going to be the ones that probably not have that high food drive. Not saying that all dragons that have a high food drive are going to be aggressive, but most of the time, what I've noticed is if they have a high food drive, they will go for your fingers. Not saying that they're going to bite your fingers. Usually, they figure out, hey, this is a finger, not a roach. But sometimes they will try to bite your hand just because this is something moving. I'm hungry. Let's go. So, with that said, the ones that are average size are usually more mellow because they don't have that high food drive. Not saying those are not going to be aggressive. Those can still be aggressive. It's just taming down. You have to tame it down. It's harder to tame down a dragon that's always ready for food. But those are easier to tame down if they're average size. Now, obviously, growth spurts happen at any time in a bearded dragon's life. So essentially, right now I have a dragon that's about 12 months, 13 months old. He was about 2 months ago. He was about, how much was he? 120 grams. And now, if you've looked at my growth rate on my website, usually by 12 months, I try to get them to 150. He was on par to get to 150 by 12 months because 2 months ago, he would have been 11 or 10 months, and he was 120. Now, he's pushing 200 grams, almost 200 grams. I think he's like 180, 190, and he's 13 grams. He had a growth spurt. It happened just like that. He had 2 sheds back to back every month. 1 shed a month. Boom, boom. He got up to 180, 190 grams. It was, I mean, it happens. Technically, if you were looking at that dragon and comparing it to that 6 month, 200 gram dragon, you would have been like, oh my gosh, that's a small dragon. 13 months, now he's pushing 200. Obviously, 6 months, 200. That's a big difference. Guess what? By the time these both dragons are 2 years old, they're probably going to be the same size. And actually, in length, they're probably going to be the same. But when you look at the weight versus each other, that 6 month, 200 gram dragon is probably going to be overweight because the person's still feeding it like it was a 6 month, 200 gram dragon. And I'm feeding mine like it's a 2-year-old bearded dragon that doesn't need to eat as often. So essentially, those are important things you need to know. Right now, I have 4 dragons together. They're all babies, so don't come at me. Oh, you're not supposed to. They're all babies. They're all females as well. 4 dragons that have a very, very high food drive. But the reason I put them together is not because I want them to grow the same rate. It's because they all have a high food drive. And as a breeder, usually, not saying this is always the case, usually if one dragon has a high food drive, it usually makes all the other dragons have a high food drive as well. That's just the way I've done it. Every once in a while, I see one with a high food drive, and I'll put it in there with other dragons the same size. And it's almost like because they're competing more for the food, they want the food more. So I don't know how to put it. But that could also go the other direction. A high food drive bearded dragon can make other dragons decide, hey, I'm letting him go first. I don't even want to be a part of it. And then all the food is gone and then they're starving. So it really could go one or two ways. But this is just something that I do as myself. Obviously, I monitor them to make sure they're all eating. And they're all actually growing the same rate. They've been together for like 2 months. And they're all growing the same rate. And they're all eating almost exactly the same amount of food. So I know it's working for them. Not saying it's going to work for everybody. As they get bigger, they're going to get separated because obviously they can't fit all 4 in the same enclosure. But essentially what you need to do as a buyer, ask those questions. Figure out where it falls inside of the entire clutch. Figure out how big the parents were. If you can't get this information, go find somebody else. I hate to say it, but if a breeder doesn't want to give you the information that you're asking for, it's probably not somebody you want to do business with. And that's it. That's really all I got. Oh, I do have one more clip. The clip is 2 different dragons that are from different clutches that are the same size, that are about a week and a half apart. Let's roll that clip. Okay, then we have these 2. They're actually not related, so they're not from the same clutch. Why are you out of the shot, man? They're actually about the same size. The difference in age is about a week and a half or so. And this is Hercules. So Hercules is a hypo leatherback genetic stripe het translucent. And then this is Meg, or Megra, if you guys watch the movies. Actually, no, I think Greek mythology is the same way. Hercules has a wife named Meg. So, or Megra, obviously in the movie, the Hercules Disney movie from 90-something. They had named her Meg for short. But Meg here is a hypotrans dunner, and she has some nice blue barring. Obviously it's hard to tell because she won't stop moving. And she also has a nice little stripe. It's a color stripe, I guess you could call it. We'll know more the older she gets. It seems to be getting more and more defined. Stop trying to run away. But they are about a week and a half difference in age, and they are about the same size. Meg is a little bit older. No problem with her size being about the same size as another dragon that's a week and a half younger. That's not a big deal. But this just goes to show growth rate. It's important, but not as important as most people want to put out there. Oh, my dragon grew in 6 months to 200 grams. That's not something to brag about. These dragons here are about, I want to say 2 months old, and they are actually probably 2.5 months old. But they're about, actually, she's a little bit older, but they're about, I want to say 20 grams, something like that. I don't really weigh the holdbacks. I just make sure they're growing. But yeah, so they're about the same size, even though they're a different age. It's not a big deal to me as long as they're both growing. Like I showed you with the last clip, sometimes they just grow faster, and that's nothing you can do about it. I'm not saying that bigger female is something to brag about. I'm not saying that the smaller female in the last clip was something to brag about. It's just they all have different growth rates, but bragging that one dragon got to 200 grams in 6 months, that's outrageous. And people like to do that. People prefer making their dragons grow that quick, and that's not healthy. Now, as you can see with Hercules and Meg, that you're going to find that they're about the same size, even though Hercules is a week and a half or so smaller than or younger than Meg. So could it be growth rate? Possibly. Could it be one of them just growing differently than another? Possibly. Could it be they're all going to be the same size at the end of the road? Definitely. So it's just a matter of where they're at right now compared to their clutch mates. And Meg is the clutch mate from the 4 dragons that I showed in that other clip. And Hercules is not a clutch mate of any of the dragons I showed in this, but all of his siblings are about the same size as well. Actually, there's another clip. Let me roll that clip too. And then you have some clutches where almost every single dragon's the same size. And there is one little one. This guy over here is a little bit smaller. And then these two are a little bit bigger. But overall, they're about the same size. They're not too drastically in size difference. Now this guy has a little bit of poop on his back. That's why they're getting baths. But if you guys want to find out how I determine if I have a runt or not, you can watch my video for the members, because they're looking more at the business aspect. So the member videos will get a separate video from this talking about how to determine if you have a runt. And yeah, but there you go. About all the same size here, minus the one off over here on the side. So actually that clip is Hercules clutch mates, and essentially they're all about the same size minus one. One of them is a little on the smaller side. And if you, like I said, want to know how I determine if something is a runt, go to my Patreon, go to a YouTube member, become a member, watch that video, because this is more so for the breeder person versus the person that's watching this video, which would be probably a pet owner or someone that wants to become a bearded dragon owner. So go watch the Patreon video. That's going to be strictly on what to do if you have a runt, how to determine that you have a runt, and how to prevent runts in the future. Or at least the best way to try to prevent runts in the future, because it's probably still going to happen. So with that said, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything that I put out in the future. As always, peace.